And we're back. So sorry about that. I think the ham in my sandwich I ate just before the stream was a little bad. My stomach is pretty upset. Anyways, let's see. Um, Very important with authoritative servers for simulations. Yes, absolutely. That is actually something that you should take as an unwritten rule for any kind of multiplayer environment. The server must always be the ultimate authority in everything. Basically, the game client should be nothing more than a script executor and have the server tell the client what to render and when. So that's definitely something that you need to heavily rely on in your server implementation. And you can put that up for say desktop applications as well. If you have some kind of networked application setup, you definitely always want to make sure that the ultimate authority lies with the server itself, not the client. Because at the end of the day, if you employ a bit of healthy paranoia and go about your client with the preset that you can never trust your client, then a good portion of your code design for handling the data that's being transmitted between server and client will be a lot safer. And if somebody should try to hijack the communication, then you have better means of detecting such hijacking of your network connections. Um, Say, for example, to detect some kind of bot interjection in your game design. Definitely go about it with a healthy amount of paranoia, that's for sure. Especially in modern times where so much hacking and malware and all the other ugly junk is going on. So definitely. Okay, so where were we? I was missing the last entry here. Schedules. Let's get the reset index. We also need to make sure that the backup flag is correct. So let's check that. And if these are correct, then we can do a quick check on the triggered. If this is triggered, then we simply reset it. So we shall reset the triggered flag back to false. There we go. And this then takes care of, let's see, ensure that we have a valid schedule entry index. Check that the two schedule entry profiles match, ignoring the seconds, since those are custom added by this particular schedule manager. Was this event triggered? Yes. Reset it. All done. Alright, so we now have the means to check our queued up schedules. We have the means to trigger events when the scheduled times arrive, and we also have the means to reset them afterwards. One thing that we still don't have is, let's see, that's the for loop, so that would be this one. Yep, here. And then we'll put in a, that's the while, so that would be here. Wait for a bit. I'll do 5 milliseconds. There we go. And then I'll check again. All right. That should take care of this. So we still need to be able to start this thing, and we need to be able to stop it again. Let's get some coffee, like a good developer. There we go. Start monitor. That would be the one that fires up the thread thing. So what did we call this thing? There we go. And this be need to remember to set the running flag to true, so we can set it to false later to shut down the thread. All right, so let's get this thing set up. Monitor thread equals new thread start, and have it point at the monitor schedules. There we go. And then we need to start it. And for the sake of ensuring that it starts up and stabilizes correctly, we'll check whether it is alive. And as long as it isn't, we will simply wait for a few milliseconds, and that should do the trick. All right, so start monitor. That's something we need to do when this class is instantiated. So we'll put that here. There we go. And then up here we need to shut it down. So we'll set running to false, and then we will do another while. The monitor thread is alive. We will simply wait for it to shut down, and that will delay the disposal until the monitoring thread has completely shut down. And then from here we can of course kill it, and we can kill the schedules by clearing the array, and that should be enough. There we go. All right, so we should now be able to schedule a couple of different types of events, have some resetting going on, and we've exposed 2 events that we can hook, so we can properly trigger when some of these scheduled events actually occur. Ba-dum-bum-bum. And I lost track of my trailer. Yeah. All right. That should take care of the schedule manager, at least for the most part. What we do with it is, of course, the next little bit. The schedule manager will be the one that takes care of triggering when these scheduled events occur, of course. So we should probably put it in here somewhere. And for that purpose, we will add it in here. And we'll do the schedule manager in here. There we go. All right. So, of course, the schedule manager won't be doing much unless we actually add schedules to it. Before we can do that, we kind of need to add in some kind of scheduling system, meaning we need to be able to set up the schedules. And thank you very much, Pritchett bots. Not sure if this happens automatically, to be honest. Fairly new to Twitch. It's appreciated nonetheless. In any case, we need some kind of schedule editor for our profiles, and that's definitely something that we don't have at the moment. Well, thank you very much. It's very kind of you. So, how are we going to okay, cool. Thank you. Back to work. Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, Pritchett. Okay, so the question then becomes, where should we put the schedule stuff? Should we put it in the server profile, or should we do a separate schedule dialog for it? I'm kind of thinking that we'll do a separate setup so that we can keep the actual server configuration, the technical stuff in here, and then have all of the scheduled stuff set up separately. That way we don't have to remember that we need to dig into 5 layers of server configuration to get at the scheduled stuff, but we'll have it available right here. So let's see if we can get that stuff in there. That's definitely something that we need to get worked out before we can actually start using the schedule manager. For the sake of keeping things here, for now we will reference it so we can build on it later on. So we will call this one Restart Manager, just because we could have called it pretty much anything, but this sounds like a good idea. Okay. We also need to hook the events, so we'll do a quick method here. Initialize Restart Manager. Laggy Visual Studio again. There we go. It didn't register that I released the key on the keyboard. There we go. All right. So here we need to hook the 2 events. So we shall do that, which would be the Restart Manager, not method. There we go. We need the scheduled backup. So we'll grab that. And we also need the scheduled restart. There we go. All right. So these are the 2 events. And I actually want these in the opposite order. Scheduled backup. Like so. Get rid of this one. We don't want it to crash out with an exception. And that would be the scheduled restart. And these are actually things that you may want to consider putting in your game server as well. Once you start building up game servers as such, you definitely need to have implemented some kind of maintenance and management handling for your game server. Because at some point you will have to do an emergency shutdown of your server for whatever reason. Could be corrupted data, or you could have lost connection to a one or more database servers if you're relying on a database backend. Um, you could have, say, um, 2,000 orphaned client connections that for some reason won't release, and you need to be able to forcibly shut down your server for a restart or for maintenance or whatever. Those are tools that you definitely need to put in at a very early stage of your server design, so you can properly access your gaming environment and shut it down whenever you need to. At the moment, what I'm doing here is just implementing the scheduling stuff so we can set up specific times. But part of what I want to do with this is also implement additional features that would allow me to say, for example, if I do a stop of the server, instead of it immediately shutting it down, I could add in an option that says, hey, do a warned shutdown, um, which would then, for example, throw a message in the game chat that says emergency shutdown in 5 minutes, which would then allow players to get to a safe position, log out, and 5 minutes later the server shuts down. Um, Players kind of hate when server administrators all of a sudden just boom shut down. It gives a very bad impression on handling and management of the game assets. So that's definitely something that you should think about in your design of how you want things to kind of bubble out to the players themselves. Um, at some point in a later episode, I'll add in the ability to put custom messages in chat, um, and thereby warn players that might be on the server that we are shutting down in 10 minutes for daily backup, and we will be back in, say, 30 minutes. Um, that's the kind of thing that I definitely want to put in here. Minecraft servers have an extra feature that I also want to address. One of them being automatically saving every change that occurs in the game, um, which is something that you can easily enable on a Minecraft server. And when it's running off an SSD drive, that is absolutely not a problem. But if you're running on a slower IDE drive, then having autosave enabled could at times cause a little bit of block lag, depending on how much work that hard drive has to do. Um, so it's a choice depending on the hardware you're sitting on. And for this, I would like to put in, say, do a forced save every 10 minutes schedule, something like that, for example, which would then issue the command to the server, save everything to disk right now, but before you do that, throw a warning in chat that it might lag for a few seconds while we're saving to disk. Those kind of custom messages are some are elements that I want to put in this server launcher. But before we can address that, we kind of need to look at how the Minecraft chat actually works, so we can build up some code that can follow those requirements of the Minecraft chat in order to display those specific custom messages. Eventually, it would be nice if we could also add in options that would allow us to completely customize those messages. So we can use the server launcher to determine these are the kind of messages I want to send to my players while I'm hosting these servers, instead of just using some stock options that I might put in there. So those are things for the future. For now, it's kind of important to get the basics built in first. So we'll get there. Now, since these are coming from a different thread, we kind of need to figure out whether we have to invoke them or not. So um, just so we don't forget, might as well put that in here right away. So we shall put a new action in here, and since we only need to transfer an ID, that's what we're going to do. And then from here, handle shutdown, do the backup, restart the server. Since this is the backup event, over here we are simply just doing a regular Invoke required restart. So that's basically just a forced save, shutdown, boom, restart. All right. Let's get this out of the way. Just like before, we just need to handle an integer, so it's nothing major, but still thread safety and all that. And here handle a shutdown, restart. There we go. All right. We've put them in there just to avoid us forgetting. We still need to place a call to the thingamajig here, so let's get that done. And we'll do that here. There we go. And this we can get rid of because it doesn't exist anymore. There we go. All right, so we now have at least the core mechanics for a schedule manager, but we don't have any data to feed into it. So we should probably look at adding another button to this setup where we can manipulate the schedule. So for the time being, we'll move the stop button over there, and then we'll grab another one and rename this to schedule. There we go. Stuff that down here, and this will need to move up by the other buttons. Schedule.text. I need to figure out why it's being so weird. Yeah, we'll just put schedule on there. That should be enough. In schedule.click. There we go. And put this right. And yes, I know that it's complaining that these shouldn't be lowercase. Honestly, I don't really care. That's one of those Microsoft decisions. Sorry, this would be the button schedule. And add end into it, and then grab this, and we'll go find the other buttons. They has got to be up here somewhere. For example, right here. And we're putting that in there. And here we need to add in schedule configuration. Okay, since we now have a schedule button, we kind of need to mess with our selection, because schedules should only be changeable when we have a specific server profile selected. So we definitely need to go update that. Let's see. Let's get rid of these quick. We'll get back to those at a later point. Now, up in our helper methods, we had the select server profile, which takes care of some of the buttons for us. And this would be the perfect place to add in the changes for the schedule button. So let's go here. If no profile is selected, disable the button. If a server profile is selected, we can easily enable the schedule button because it doesn't honestly matter whether the server is running or not when we edit the schedules themselves. So we will put these right here. There we go. And that should now show up correctly. Schedule is disabled as it should be. If we select a profile, it becomes enabled, just like it should be. At the moment it doesn't do anything because we haven't put any code in there. But it seems to be working exactly the way it should. And of course, something went wrong here. Yes, we didn't call the dispose. So let's see if we have a form closing event, which we at the moment don't. So we shall add it. The reason it didn't shut down is because the thread that handles the schedules is still running. We added in a shutdown procedure as part of the dispose method, so we kind of need to dispose of it correctly. There we go. So let's grab the form closing event, which triggers just before the graphical elements of the form itself are disposed of, hidden, however you want to describe it. It is about to close, so this would be the place to dispose of our restart manager. So we will dispose of it here. And the schedule manager, just to recap quick, whenever we execute the dispose method, it forces the running flag to false, which will eventually have the while loop in the monitoring thread exit. And this while loop right here takes care of waiting for that to happen. Whenever a thread exits, the isAlive property of the thread itself goes to false, indicating that it is no longer running. You can also abort it. That basically terminates the execution of the code within the thread method, wherever it is at the moment, and then exits the method. It's like doing a return. Right here, we're just ensuring that whenever the schedule manager is disposed, this particular thread shutdown takes place in a gracious way. Of course, you can always just do an abort and then take it from there. Personally, I prefer letting it shut down the way the code is meant to be shut down, i.e. let it exit the loop gracefully. All right. This could end up taking, I don't know, maybe 20 milliseconds for it to finish. Yes, the open close bracket, where should it sit? That debate is as long as the C language itself. So that is a debate that I think should be left with common grounds for whichever development team wants to set some standards for where it should be put. Personally, I couldn't care less where it sits. However, because I have been developing in a multitude of different languages, some of them have the English notation instead of the simple notation. In most cases with English notation languages, you would end up having a keyword begin or something similar, followed by a keyword end, which signifies where the code block ends, um, similar to the open and closing brackets or curly brackets. When working with English notation languages, those positions of those open and close parts are sometimes important. And in keeping with compatibility between language notations, I honestly prefer having them sitting like they do in Visual Studio, because it makes it easier to transfer between languages when you look at the logical structure of the code itself. It's easier mentally to transpose the keyword begin or the keyword then or whichever to an open or close bracket when you have kind of the same notation or placement within the different languages. But it is a um, age-long debate, and it's something that's been going on for at least 40 years, if not more. And it's one of those things that I usually put out to personal preference. Do what fits your style. There's no right or wrong way of doing it, because at the end of the day, the compiler doesn't really care about where we put things. I mean, if I grab this event, I can easily do this, and it's still perfectly feasible. The compiler itself, including IntelliSense, doesn't really care whether we put in line breaks or not. It's just a matter of formatting your code in a way where you are able to read it. And I know that there are development teams out there that absolutely hate the fact that Visual Studio puts the open bracket down here. They want it up here, and they want it up here. See if I can persuade it. There we go. They want it like this. Um, I have been working with development teams that require this bracket notation, and they end up having a tendency of throwing in extreme excessive amounts of empty lines within the code, which in my opinion makes it less readable, because you have to scroll the length of a toilet roll um, to get any kind of meaning in the code that's being written in there. Um, Personal preference. I don't mind the way that Visual Studio picks it for us. If I did, I would probably have changed it. There are tons of extensions that allow us to customize exactly how it formats the code. Um, I don't mind it. At the end of the day, it's the code that matters, not exactly how it's set up. In any case, this should now properly take care of shutting down the schedule manager. If we wanted to, we could also have put this in the closed event. Why don't we actually do that? Overall, it doesn't really matter if it's in one or the other. Uh, the closed event happens after the graphics for the form have disappeared from screen. Well, for my case, I mean, if you look at, let's grab, well, if you take a look at Lua, for example, Lua scripting, Lua is also fairly straightforward. Let's see. Let's grab one of these instances. This one should suffice. Yeah, let's grab this one. Open computers, and one of these will have some of my code. Not quite sure which one. Yeah, let's grab this one. Okay, so this is Lua. Lua is fairly straightforward, and if you compare this function with a method in C#, for example, this particular if statement right here in C# would look like this. So if string.find fnd num, and return blah 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 blah. In this case, the the then keyword acts as the open bracket, and the end acts as the close bracket. That is specific to languages like Lua or Basic, for example. They use this particular notation. In terms of comparing to other languages, a language like Pascal or Delphi, as it's now known as, you always have a setup like this, where you would do the same thing, and then you have an actual begin and an actual end. This is Delphi notation. So here it follows what Visual Studio does. For my personal preference, I honestly don't care how the code is formatted as long as the individual logic blocks are correctly indented. Indentation tells you exactly where a piece of code is and what relies on that piece of code being executed. Whether you have the begin bracket and the close bracket on the line where whatever logic controls it is, or if it's at the next one, it doesn't really matter, because this is what matters. One of the main reasons that Lua is so widely used these days is because of how easy it is to implement a Lua sandbox within your project. And secondly, any kind of script addition that you can put onto your project will reduce the time it takes to compile the project itself. Now, if you have a huge game, let's grab World of Warcraft again. If you take a look at the size of the executable for World of Warcraft, it is rather big. And most of the junk that's in there is either a runtime library reference or actual operational codes that are being sent directly to the CPU. Now, if you have an executable of, say, 50 megabytes, and you don't have that many graphical or other resources embedded in it, then most of that junk in there is actual CPU instructions. And an executable of that size means that it takes an awful long time to actually build the project itself. Certain projects on a certain scale, they can take as much as 2 hours to build. So whenever I go up here and do build, whoops, that was my band. There we go. So if I go up here and choose build, you can see down here in the corner that it builds and then finishes. And that took maybe a second and a half. Now, if this is a project with, say, um, close to 1 million lines of code, then it could easily take half an hour to build. Um, so how do you reduce that, so to speak, waste time whenever you need to make a change to, say, an entity's AI behavior? Well, one of the ways of doing that is by um, embedding some form of scripting that allows you to change the AI behavior through scripting that the executable then executes according to what the script says. That effectively means the only thing you need to do is change the script, reload the script within this hosted sandbox to apply those changes to the AI and see if it works now. By doing so, you have reduced the AI development time to a mere seconds instead of having to rebuild the entire project for another 30 minutes just to make that one slight alteration to the AI behavior. That's why things like Lua scripts or JavaScript for that matter are becoming more and more integral parts of game development today. It takes a long time to build large projects and large games, so scripting is definitely the way in. Um, Another bonus feature of scripting in the case of this particular setup. This is a town name generator for Open Computers, which is a mod for Minecraft. It allows us to write custom scripts using Lua that do something with world interaction within the game itself. So that all of a sudden adds up a whole new dimension of stuff you can do with the game. If you take a look at um, the whole premise for the UI for World of Warcraft, it is all built on XML templates that define, they call it widgets, say a button, for example. There's a widget template for a button that you can then create. And then you can use Lua code to load up textures and put them on that button for a hover effect, some text, click events, and so on, and have the Lua code react to those events. So the entire UI for World of Warcraft and Runes of Magic, they are pretty similar, those two. All of that stuff runs off XML templates and all of the stuff that all the Lua scripting creates, and thereby you have a fully customizable UI that you as the developer can more easily change if you need to without having to recompile the game. Um, but it also opens up for things like custom add-ons that the community can make. And that's definitely something that people want. They want to be able to customize games today. They want to be able to customize the UI. They want to be able to mod the game. Those are typically some of the first things that a community starts asking about. When can we get modding? When can we get add-on stuff? Are we getting that? It's all part of the process today. Everybody expects it, and scripting is one of the ways of accomplishing that particular setup. All of the words here, and yes, I know that some of them are kind of offensive. All of this name generation scripting here is based on Transport Tycoon Deluxe. If you go look up OpenTTD, these are the word pieces that are used to generate the town names within the games. And you can actually find the source code for this for OpenTTD somewhere and find these exact setups. In this case, I've just converted it to a Lua script instead. Um, but that's how the town names are generated. And yes, I know some of them are a bit offensive, but it ends up generating some nifty names that can be used. Yeah, exactly. And even today, Curse still runs strong and even stronger after Minecraft showed up because all of a sudden there was a whole new modding community that was interesting. So definitely, scripting is the way to go, especially when we're working with huge projects that take a long time to build. If I were to venture a guess at how long it takes to build um, the executable for World of Warcraft, I would guess somewhere between an hour and a half and maybe 2 hours. It is a gigantic game with gigantic scopes of code, and they have a lot of services that are running in the background as part of the game to, for example, handle chat communication and authentication and instance handling and all the other stuff that goes on that isn't directly game content related. All that stuff is also code that needs to be loaded up and executed. So it'll take quite a bit of time to actually build that executable. Um, so every time you need to do an actual build of the project itself, you kind of want to postpone doing the actual build until all departments have checked in with whatever corrections they need to make. Then you collect all of it and then you do a single build and then do a test run on that to see if all those bugs have been fixed. So it's all a matter of trying to reduce the waste time that your company is in effect throwing in the trash can, because 2 hours in Blizzard's terminology, that's a lot of money out the door. Where you've got highly paid developers basically sitting there twiddling their thumbs. So scripting is the way to go. And if you want to look at messing about with Lua, a simple Google for C# space Lua would link you to a couple of different libraries that you can fetch and fairly easily implement as part of your C# project, which then instantly grants you a full Lua sandbox to play with. Okay, where were we? I forgot what I was doing. The shutdown thing for the... Yes, that's what we were doing. Let's see if it shuts down correctly now. It should. There we go. Um, right. All right. So we got the thingamajig updated. We probably need to keep this one open because we need to do some kind of schedule configuration. So let's see if we can oh yeah. And it's a little bit like taking a driver's license. You can go to school and you can learn all the theory behind it, but you will never ever get any of the really valuable information at university or at school in computer science classes. They are there to teach you the basics and the entry into this world. Um, well, I've been, yeah. um, Once you have learned the basics and school has taught you, this is the world that you are about to step into. Here is the license that grants you the right to mess with this stuff. That's when you start learning how to actually do stuff. It's exactly the same thing when you take a driver's license. You are taught the rules of the road, driving laws, how to operate your vehicle, but when you actually receive your driver's license, you have a skill level of about zero in terms of how well you are able to manage what you see ahead of the vehicle, manage your vehicle itself, and the skills required to drive in a safe and stable way. And it's exactly the same thing with coding. It takes years, and I mean years, to get to the point where you have the skills and you have developed the curiosity um, in terms of what can code do and how do I go about this. Um, it takes years to develop and hone those skills, and you effectively need to learn to ask a shit ton of questions, pardon my language, and be able to try and step into the shoes of a crime investigator, for example. Um, their primary job is to ask questions and then try to figure out the answers. It's exactly the same thing with code development. You need to learn to ask yourself all the weird questions that you can think of when you're facing some kind of task or some kind of problem with your code, and then satisfy your own curiosity regarding those questions by investigating what's possible. How can I do this? How do other people do this? In those regards, Google is your friend. You can always Google your way to some kind of hint about which direction to take with your code to achieve this particular goal. But you need to learn the basics of asking questions and satisfying those questions with some kind of answer. That is the core of any developer. And that's stuff they don't teach you at school. They teach you the theory, the basic rules, and the basic tools. That's it. They don't teach you to become the code investigator that you actually need to be a good, solid developer. And part of what I'm doing here with these streams is I'm trying to convey these um, curiosities and how to satisfy any given question that might pop up with some piece of code. I had a very clear design idea for this particular application, and had I just, how should I put this, attacked the project, I could have done it in 2 days. But exactly, that's exactly the way to go, James. Um, ask questions because you want to know, and then become the sponge that sucks up all the information you can get your hands on. And in development, like Sky says, there are no stupid questions. There are only stupid answers and stupid people treating curious developers badly. Those are the ones you need to avoid. But always ask questions. If you don't ask, you're never going to learn. And if you feel that you might become annoying by asking questions, that is something you need to teach yourself to stop worrying about. Because this is a highly specialized world. It is a world where most other people, no offense, kind of drop out and can't really keep up with it. Um, but once you hit a developer somewhere that has some experience and knows how you can manipulate the code, then that would be the right forum to ask all your questions. And keep in mind, there are no stupid questions in coding. Um, the only questions that matter are the ones that satisfy your desire to learn and your desire to know. Those are the important questions. But always ask questions, and even if you know the answer beforehand, ask the question anyway. Ask yourself, and then force yourself to try mentally to explain to yourself why this is the solution. That will teach you a whole lot more about what the code actually does and how it works than you can find in any manual anywhere. That's the important entry into the world of programming. Exactly, just like Sky says. Okay, let's see if we can. Well, actually, I just tell myself I don't care what others think about me, and I ask whatever I want. Surprisingly, everyone has tried to answer the questions I have. Yes, that is, in my opinion, the right attitude to employ when you want to learn about coding. Um, it's not about how people perceive you. In the world of coding, we were all noobs at some point. Um, and it's vitally important that every developer in the world always remembers that at some point you were a noob too. And while the word noob today has a very negative ring to it, it originated as a contraction of the word newbie, which means you just started doing this stuff. And there's nothing negative about somebody that just started something and wants to learn. Um, Always remember that you were a noob once. There are a lot of things that I'm a noob at, even today. I'm 45 years old, and I have been programming since the age of 8. And there are a ton of things that I don't know about coding. I know a lot of stuff about coding, about principles and how to manipulate code to my will, but there is just as much about coding that I don't know. Every single day for my entire life has been a day of learning, every single day, and I enjoy every minute of it because it brings me um, more knowledge. It With more knowledge comes greater power over handling the code. Um, with greater power over handling the code and understanding what it does, it grants you a wider spectrum of your capabilities in terms of which tasks you will be capable of completing. So keep learning. That is my best advice to any developer out there. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and don't ever sit back and hold back questions that you might want to ask because you're afraid that it might sound stupid. There are no stupid questions, only stupid answers. I kind of missed two events. Commander Drew and James, thank you very much for the follow, both of you. And keep drinking coffee. Absolutely. Cheers. Um, like my desktop kind of says here, hidden away somewhere, a programmer is a tool for converting caffeine into code. And that holds true. Okay, so we were building a scheduling thing. The thing about scheduling, most people know, well, at 12 o'clock there's lunch, at 1 o'clock I have a dentist appointment, at 2 o'clock I'm picking up my sister, and at 5 we're doing shopping, and at 6:30 we're doing dinner. That's pretty easy for us. It's an acquired skill, but it's fairly easy. Uh, Eat, sleep, code, repeat. Yep. Oh, you are so very welcome. That's the primary reason I'm doing these streams. Hopefully I'll be able to convey some of these things and maybe remove some of the anxiety in stepping into this world. Um, just be prepared that it is by far one of the worst time consumers ever invented, but it is also highly gratifying. And thank you ever so much for the feedback, Sir Pinwheel. It is highly appreciated. Um, Scheduling. In terms of getting a computer to understand this, well, we've done some of it when we built the schedule manager. The rest of it, um, um, good one, James. um, we kind of need to build up something where we can define these schedules, and that's basically the step we're at right now. Some of this I might appear to be just spewing out as if I've done this thousands of times before. I probably have, um, but it's kind of important that we keep track of how we arrive at some kind of conclusion. So initially, when you look at the problem, try and analyze what's required to achieve this particular goal. In terms of scheduling, the initial thought process for designing it should be something about along the lines of, okay, how do normal real people do this? Um, Normal real people go about this. We have a watch. It tells us the time of day, and we've got these particular time intervals where we need to do specific things. Okay, the next step would then be analyzing how we arrive at a specific event, say, for example, lunch. Oh, it's 12 o'clock, it's time to eat. Um, okay, what goes into that particular process? The particular process is we look at the watch and what does the watch say? It says 12:00. Okay, so that's 12 hours, 0 minutes. That would then be the event trigger, um, which tells us to go eat lunch. So how do we actually schedule these things? Well, we declare a statement that says at 12 we eat lunch. Um, so to get to the next stage of this scheduled stuff, we kind of need to set up something that can list what kind of schedules we've defined um, and at what time of day they are defined. So we definitely need to add in a new kind of dialogue. So we'll go add in a new form and see if we can follow the rest of the design. Okay, so we shall call this one schedule dialog just because we can. Um, we did some custom coloring on this stuff, so let's get those. I believe we used this one, and we probably used something along the lines of this one for the text. Okay, so um, the next part of it, well, we need to add in some kind of editing that allows us to specify an hour and a minute. We also need to add in some kind of list that shows the number of events created, if any, and what they are set up to do. Um, how we go about this is, well, kind of a matter of us choosing. Um, Honestly, that would be a waste of your precious time because there are tons of such sites out there already. Stack Overflow, for example. Um, Stack Overflow is an excellent place for both beginners and professionals to join up. MSDN would be another one. Those are both great communities for programmers to get together, but I'm pretty sure that you can find similar communities in your local area. Um, it's basically just a matter of um, going through Google and see what you could find. Um, it kind of depends on what kind of community you're looking for. There is a huge game development community as well out there in a similar fashion to Stack Exchange, where people exchange coding ideas, coding questions, and such. Yeah, I get where you want to go with this, but there's one thing that you need to be aware of. If you are trying to pick up graphics designers and animators, then the programming community is the wrong place to look for them. The problem is that most of these different aspects of game development are fragmented. You have animators in one community, you have graphics designers in a different community, you have texture designers in yet another different community. Um, you have scripters in a community, you have sound effect people in a community, you've got musicians in a community, and then you have all the different kinds of programmers in tons of different communities. Um, and they usually only kind of get together when someone from one of these communities starts going across the other communities, posting on boards and forums, hey, I'm looking for. One interesting thing about this is if you visit Open Game Art, for example, that is the one community that I have found where both programmers and artists alike tend to show up for different reasons. That would be an entry point, but don't expect to find any of the really good stuff there. But they can probably hint you in the right direction. Absolutely. Um, it's a way in. Doing an actual website for it, well, you could go about doing that, but then you would also have to do a lot of posting in all those other different communities to kind of get people aware of its existence, and then hope to God that they choose to join. For the most part, and I'm not trying to be arrogant here. It's just a statement of fact. Most of the really good designers, graphical designers, developers, texture makers, sound makers, musicians, programmers, most of the really good ones, they would most likely think twice about joining such an open community because there is a tendency for the less experienced ones to kind of snag on and want to um, attach themselves to the really good ones, and they might not have time to be part of, say, a 14-year-old's dream of building a World of Warcraft competition project. Um, So the really good ones, they are actually very difficult to get a hold of, and that's in every branch. it's not just programming or animators or whatever. The really good ones are probably snagged by Blizzard already, if not Roberts Space Industries, most likely. We've seen a couple of really excellent graphics engine developers migrate from company X over to Roberts Space Industries for Star Citizen. Um, Not going to mention any further names, but they actually have. So the really great ones are probably already highly employed, but the next best thing, well, most of them will probably try and keep a low profile to avoid suddenly being involved in 50 different projects that they might not have the time for. But it's an interesting idea, yes, absolutely. Give it a shot and see what happens. You can always start up on a Discord channel. That would be the quick and easy entry point to this, and then start advertising that you are hosting such a Discord community and see what happens. In some cases, you may want to drop by IRC and see what kind of channels are there. And what kind of people you can find there, because some of the better ones might be hiding out on IRC instead. Um, Plenty of other places that you can stick your nose in and see what's going on. Um, but it's worth a try. But before you start spending a month building up a website for it, see what you can dig up first. That would be my advice to you. So you don't end up wasting a lot of time building a website that nobody ever visits. That would be a shame. Okay, so let's see. Scheduling. We know that we need to specify hours, we need to specify minutes. The question then becomes, should we just put a text box that you can type in? Um, um, we could do some numeric up downs. We could do some drop down boxes. We kind of want to keep this quick and easy. Um, um, Note to self: don't try to inhale the coffee. Bad idea. Excuse me. Um, so I think we will just go with a couple of drop down boxes. Um, Nothing to be sorry about, Sky. We're both eagerly awaiting the arrival of Star Citizen. Absolutely. Which is yet another project. Oh well. Anyway, let's see if we can set up some kind of configuration for this. Now, let's see. How did we do these? We used a fixed dialog, so we'll do the same here. And do the center screen. Let's see, this one fixed dialog, there we go. And we'll change this to schedules. There we go. All right. This one we don't want to be able to minimize. We don't want to be able to maximize it, so let's get rid of those. Let's see. We need a time of day and whether it should just be a restart or a backup thing. And if it is a backup, we kind of need to specify where it should drop the backups. So we definitely need to add some kind of path specification, and blah 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 blah. Let's see. Where is the combo box? Right here. Um, grab one of these, like so. We'll need another one, and a couple of labels probably. Actually, we'll do. Yeah, we'll put a list box in here. There we go. Put this up here, and then, oops, do schedules, like so, and put a list box, and we'll see if we can customize this a little bit. Let's see, back color. We want to use this one, and for the fore color, we'll do this one. There we go. Custom coloring. All right. Then, let's see. I'll need a button of some kind. Actually, let's see. We only want to add and remove those, so yeah. That is definitely something that I have seen way too many times before in a lot of different development projects. So one of the major thing that most people forget about in terms of being part of such a project is that it is a long-term project, regardless whatever it is. It's not something that you can do or build or complete in 10 minutes. It's not something that you can finish and ship out in a week, not even a month, maybe in a couple of years. And if you are not prepared to invest that kind of time in a project, then you shouldn't even offer your help or ask if you can be part of it. You have to commit to a long-term project if it's going to be any kind of good. For the most part, if you take a look at this particular project that I'm streaming here, I could probably have done this project in maybe 2 or 3 days if I were not spending the time to explain everything I'm doing and why I'm doing things and explain how the code works and all that stuff. If I just focused 100% on doing it, I could probably do this entire project in a couple of days, maybe 3, and it would be done to my satisfaction. However, when other people are part of a project, you kind of need to merge on some form of schedule where you're actually putting work into the project. That can be difficult, especially across time zones. You probably need to come up with a better planning in terms of what elements need to go into the project, and especially when it comes to say, for example, game development, and we're talking about adding music or sound effects or graphics. If it's something like adding in, say, static 2D load screens, even creating a single load screen can sometimes take months because it has to go through a lot of changes and a lot of review slash approval processes before it becomes the final image for this particular load screen. In terms of music, music is by definition emotional, which means whoever is creating the music is putting his or her or their emotions into this particular piece of music, but those emotions may not match the scene that this particular piece of music is intended for because they haven't gotten the right impression of that particular scene. Say if it's a cut scene of a spacecraft docking with a space station, then you can show the graphics, but if you don't explain the mood of the pilot that's currently docking that this particular piece of music is for, then the musicians will have an entirely different viewpoint and emotional state when viewing that graphics compared to what you designed this particular scene to be as the code developer or the animator. So there's a shit ton of communication that has to go on between all the different parties that are part of this creative process. And if you are not interested in investing that kind of work and that kind of time in it, then you probably shouldn't be part of it. Any kind of development, any kind of building, and it doesn't matter if it's game development or if it's application development or if it's web development, any kind of development project is always extremely time consuming and is highly emotional in terms of what the final product should be. And that's something that anybody participating in such a project needs to be aware of before they step into it. Um, some may offer the help because they think it's an awesome project, but they have no clue how big of a time investment it actually is to be part of it. They kind of expect, oh, that's a project we can do in a couple of weeks, and then, cool, we've got a game. Nope. It takes a long time to develop a game. Star Citizen that we talked about earlier um, surfaced about when, Sky? The idea, the crowdfunding for it showed up in the wild a few years back. Before that, they probably discussed the design concept, the ideas for 10 or 20 years, hashing out what this is supposed to be. I know for a fact that Chris Roberts had the core idea for Star Citizen way back when he developed Wing Commander. And because the technology wasn't up to snuff for his ideas back then, it's taken maybe 20 years to get to the point where he can actually start developing this dream he has, which is turning into what we know as Star Citizen. So it is a very lengthy process, and unfortunately, um, say musicians or last part of 2011. Yeah, see, that's 6, 7 years ago. Um, and that's just the initial startup process. And from there, it probably went on a couple of years before they actually wrote the first line of code for the project itself. So it is a lengthy process. It's something that you need to stick with. If you're not interested in sticking with a project, then don't step into it. Um, but that can be a little bit hard to convey to, say, young fledgling musicians or young fledgling graphics designers that have a passion for modeling 3D monsters or whatever. The instant they are put in a situation where it has to be this way, not your way. I want it that way because I'm the designer. This is my project. It's not yours. Then they kind of back out because I'm sick of being told what I have to do. Well, sorry to tell you this, but the development process of any kind of media stuff, you take orders, you don't give them. And I'm sorry to say it this cold, but it is you take orders, you do not give them. You have a certain amount of creative freedom in whatever you do, but at the end of the day, you take orders. And you have to satisfy those orders, because if you don't and you try to rebel, then that project will never end. It will never see the light of day, and it will never ever earn as much as a cent, because it will never be realized. It will be an ongoing internal fight and war between every person in that development team wanting to assert their authority because they don't want to take orders. Any programmer out there is a person that takes orders. Any graphics designer out there is a person that takes orders. Any musician out there is a person that takes orders. That's just a fact of life, because if you don't get into that mindset, then you will never be part of in any kind of team that will ever accomplish anything. Even the person that designed the concept, the person that came up with the idea and designed, say, the entire game world and the game mechanics or whatever, even that person that effectively has the vision for this particular project, even that person is a person that takes orders, because no one human being is capable of ever achieving enough knowledge to be capable of doing all of the 3D graphics perfectly, all of the music perfectly, all of the programming perfectly, all of the marketing perfectly, all of the advertisement stuff perfectly, and so on and so forth. No one person is capable of doing this. Some can do it to some degree of success. What's his name? Considerate Ape, or whatever his name is, that made Stardew Valley. That is a single developer, and he has accomplished some of these tasks on his own, one person. He went out and achieved a fair amount of success with his title. It's a great game. I highly recommend it. And no, I'm not earning any kind of credit advertising for it. But that's one in a million capable of doing this, one man. So when you step into a project that requires more than one person being part of it, then everybody becomes a person that takes orders. The guy with the vision for the project, that came up with the idea, that designed the whole thing, probably did it on a napkin and in his mind, and so on and so forth. At some point, he's going to step up to a developer and say, I want this feature. And then the developer goes, okay, I need to grab my team and discuss whether this is actually feasible or not. They might spend, say, a week discussing this particular feature and come up to the realization that it may not be feasible putting this particular feature in the game because the mechanics for it will be awful, or we don't have, say, VR support on every platform to properly roll this out, which then leads to the conclusion, well, if we can only supply 10% of our customers with this particular feature, then the remaining 90% will be missing out, which means this particular feature is no longer feasible. So they go back to the original guy with the concept and the idea and say, well, this is not feasible. So in that instant, the original designer becomes the guy that takes orders. You can't have this particular feature. Come up with something different. So it's always a ping pong game back and forth between who takes orders and who gives them. At the end of the day, every participant in the project itself is part of the process of giving a common agreed on order for the entire team to take on. That becomes a featured task that everybody is involved in, but everybody is taking orders from that one single task that perhaps everybody on the team has been part of defining. So accept the fact that you are a person that takes orders. When, say, a customer comes and says, hey, I need a website for this, blah, 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 then you're taking the order from the customer. Even though you're a sole developer that creates this particular website, you're still taking an order. So get in the mindset of accepting that. The sooner you do, the more relaxed you can become in what you do. Theme, library. Well, perfect example. Um, Actually, a very nice example. Um, I think one of the interesting things that we actually see in the gaming community today in terms of something that is more easily accessible. The RPG Maker series is in effect a 2D somewhat simplistic engine that handles graphical assets. There's a huge asset community associated with it, and it's something that most people can actually grab at and start doing RPG games, creating RPG games fairly quickly. Um, but if you look at the history of RPG Maker, the initial version of it way back in the day, when it started surfacing on the web, it was a single guy doing it. And at some point, he actually managed to grab a bunch of talented graphics designers who helped him build graphical assets because what he did wasn't all that great. It kind of looked like, oh, you did that in Paint in 2 minutes. Um, and from there, it developed into a multi-person team that now develops new version after version after version with expanded features. They've got a bunch of highly skilled developers working on it, and I know for a fact that they have rewritten the entire graphics handling engine close to 10 times over the years just to um, get a better library out there for this particular purpose. But it is only good for one thing, and that is to make those Pokemon-style RPG games. It's not particularly useful for anything else, but it's a perfect example of something that started with a single guy and over the years grew up to become a well-greased engine, well-oiled engine that actually manages to spit out pretty decent quality these days. So, well, as long as you guys manage to at some point manage to um, learn to listen to each other and learn to weigh your decisions and accept the fact that may not be one singular person making all the decisions, but having it a team effort instead, then, well, you should be able to accomplish good things together. Um, and that would be one of the major reasons that a lot of development projects in the gaming industry or fledgling, wanting huge projects end up falling apart because people keep arguing instead of accepting that everybody in the team takes orders. Once everyone has learned that fact, it becomes a heck of a lot easier to discuss topics and find common ground where this particular topic can be fit into the roadmap or the design goals or whatever. Um, of course, it sometimes helps if the team effectively switches over to become a dictatorship. I'm not supporting any kind of dictators. Please don't take it that way. But in some way, some part of the team may at some point have to step in as the ultimate authority and make the decision and go, we are going with cake because the cake is not a lie. And then the rest of the team will have to follow and accept that. But if everybody wants to step into that role, then it's doomed to fail pretty much from the get-go. So regardless what kind of development you do, if you go into any kind of development, whatever it is you do, with the mindset that you are there to take orders from wherever, then you will be more susceptible to input from the outside and go, that's actually an interesting idea. Let's examine that for a minute instead of, no, I want things this way. Anybody that has the attitude, no, I want things this way, in a development team of any kind, well, the only thing I see out of that is a four-letter word, and it spells DOOM. Sorry to say it, but that's the sad fact of life. If you're not willing to bend, if you're not willing to listen, if you're not willing to step up to the plate and go, okay, we might disagree on this, but let's examine this for a minute and figure out the best way to go about this. If you're not willing to do that, then it's all going to end up in arguing, and that spells the doom before you even get off the ground. So part of the curiosity of a developer, programmer, is also accepting that there might be others with different ideas that could provide you with some much needed viewpoint adjustments in terms of what it is you want to accomplish versus what you can accomplish. That's part of it. And it's vitally important that anyone in gaming development, and it doesn't matter if you're a programmer or you're a network specialist or a hardware specialist or a graphics designer or an animator, every element of that team needs to learn to accept the fact that they are there to take orders and ask questions. Everybody. Nobody is right. Nobody is the ultimate authority in such a team. It has to be debatable, because if you are not willing to accept that other people may have a different viewpoint on things, then it's just going to end up in a lot of arguing, and that spells the doom for that team or for that project, because the instant every project member ends up going to the project meetings and, oh man, I need to spend another 2 hours listening to those two idiots arguing about whether it should be red or green. Nah, I'm not going to show up today. And then you can pretty much do the math from there. I've seen it so many times before, and I beg you, please listen. It is so important. Um, have an open mind. Listen to what everyone else in your team has to say. Um, grab the argued topic, put it on the table, and try to get opinions from everybody. And then try and make a common decision from there. Everything in involving other people involves compromising. Sometimes you have to compromise on a specific feature because the hardware isn't there. Sometimes you have to compromise on a specific feature because the economy is not there. And sometimes you have to compromise because that particular team member's personal skills simply are not up to the task, and then accept that there's a compromise that has to go in there. So listen to your team members and try to convey to them, try to teach them that you are not God. I am not God. We are human beings, we are mortals, and we have to work things out. So definitely, it's something that every development team should try to learn, to lessen the amount of arguing that goes on, and that then down the line moves you one step closer to success instead of failure. And regardless, whatever project you're working on, the ultimate goal of that particular project must, by definition, be success. Nobody wants to fail. So if you're capable of analyzing things, then you're also capable of stepping back and um, kind of take a look at what's going on. Okay, we've got two guys in the team arguing all the time because of what should it be, red or green. Okay, this debate we kind of need to shelve or solve by making it blue instead, and then neither of them will be in the right. Take away the power of the argument that way. Um, it's human conflict resolution 101. And it is vitally important that every member of such a team is capable of conflict resolution in one way or another. Don't enter into the argument. Try and either resolve it or um, basically just arrest the argument and throw it in a trash can by doing something entirely different. Well, yeah, I get the whole OCD and 10,000 red flags and seeing all the problems before you encounter them. Um, this might be a personal question. So I don't know your age, James. I don't know if you have a driver's license or not. But one of the things they teach at driving schools is not to see the actual things that you have in front of you, but to learn to put all of those things aside and see the path you want to go instead. See, um, if you, for example, have to go through a path of cones with the car, then one of the major mistakes that new drivers make is that they focus on the cones. And if you have like 50 cones ahead of you that make up a path that you have to drive through, and you have to um, handle those 50 cones, their placement, where they are in relation to where the vehicle is, where you need to place the vehicle between those cones to get through that path without tipping the cones, then you're in for trouble because you see 50 red flags in front of you. You are not allowed to touch any of those cones. And that's 50 flags, that's information overload. And it will drive you completely crazy trying to manage those 50 red flags. Now, the trick here is to learn to set aside the knowledge that these 50 cones are cones that you cannot touch, you cannot tip them over. These red flags have to be set aside so you can visualize the path that you need to take to avoid those 50 obstacles. When dealing with design problems, you need to learn to do the exact same thing. Grab all those 10,000 red flags. Yeah, I know they are there. Set them aside and instead try to focus on the path you need to take to achieve the goal. And as you go through them, um, you may very well run into maybe 100 of those 10,000 red flags that you actually have to deal with. The rest of them will fall in place one by themselves as the project progresses. Focus on the path, not the obstacles. Um, well, um, if you're facing that kind of obstacle, then my advice to you would be um, get whoever is working on that engine to do a test build for you. Grab that test build and then use that test build to learn what he has developed in the engine so far. So you can learn how it works, how it reacts. Um, yeah, I would say that too, but that's one step that could help you a little bit further. Um, it's not a matter of who's considering who. If he's working on the engine and you don't have a workable engine yet, then you may need to attack a different problem that isn't related to the engine. There are always plenty of projects, or sorry, plenty of parts of such a project that anybody potentially could be working on. If it's design issues, then see if you can work out some of those design issues. If it's a matter of, say, him or them just not being considerate enough, then no offense, and I really mean no offense, then you need to step back and teach yourself not to be offended by that lack of consideration. Keep in mind that he or they, depending, may have lists of things that they have to do that are 15 miles long, and at the same time, you might be standing on the sidelines going, hey, you need to be considerate of me, I need to move on, blah, 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 blah. They are well aware of that. And the best thing that you can do is basically let them be, let them do their thing. Ask now and then, what's the progress, what's the status, and then go do something else. There's always something that you can do as part of a team, as part of a project. So step back, remove yourself from your OCD situation where you see 10,000 flags, or you get frustrated because you can't get at the engine, or whatever causes you the frustration in your current process. See if you can step away from that and do a different task until that particular issue is resolved. If it's a matter of them not making any progress because they don't know how to solve the problem, then enter into a dialogue with them and try to help them do the problem solving that they need to get through and maybe have hit a brick wall with. See if you can assist them. You may not be, let's say you're not a developer or a graphics guy or whatever the problem is. You can always step back and ask the questions they are not able to see themselves. And with outside influence, like, okay, what exactly is the problem here? Well, we can't get this to do that. Okay, if you can't get it to do this, then have you thought about maybe doing it this way instead? That's something you can easily do, even though you may not have any programming experience. Um, I've got tons of friends that help me in this manner by me presenting some kind of problem where I have to really think about how I describe my particular programming problem to a non-programmer in a way where that particular person may understand the problem that I'm facing. And in that process, I push myself beyond my peripheral range, my visual range in the code problem at the moment, and eventually by force of having to explain this to, say, a non-programmer, I end up in a process where, okay, I didn't think about that particular issue. Or when I present the problem to my friend, this friend then comes back and says, well, if that's the issue, why not put yellow cheese in there instead, or maybe grab a biscuit and step away for 10 minutes. Um, some kind of different input that gets my trail of thoughts in this particular code issue in a different direction. That's usually way more helpful than experiencing some kind of maybe frustration or come on, we need to move on, some kind of urgency, stuff like that. You can always benefit the team even in areas where you have maybe no expertise. You can still benefit the team's efforts by being able to step in and, hey, what's the problem? Can I help somehow? Um, if you're just stuck in the problem, then you need to step out of the problem yourself. And that goes for your engine developer too. If he's hitting some kind of brick wall, he needs to step out. And if he is not capable of doing that himself, then you would be the perfect team member by grabbing him and going, you need to go play a game for a week, or you need a vacation, or we need to go talk about girls, or whatever. Something that gets his mind off the problem. Because when you manage to remove your mind from whatever problem you're facing and can step back and basically build a small break for yourself and then come back to the problem, you will always be re-examining that particular problem with a different mindset. And that may just be the solution to the problem at hand. I've done that so many times, just stepped away, gone for a walk, or called up a friend, or I don't know, taken a bath, and when I come back, oh, that's the magic solution. Of course, why didn't I think of that 10 hours ago when I was fighting this particular problem? Because I was not in the mindset of being capable of finding that solution. So you can always help, but try to remove yourself from the frustration. Do something else, see if you can assist with whatever problem might be there, but definitely try and get away from whatever is causing the frustration, because that will only provide one thing, and that's gas on the fire. And that's a direction you don't want to go. Hi there, Billy. Welcome to the stream. So yeah, definitely see if you can step away and then come back with a different mindset and attack the problem again. But try to avoid being stuck in whatever frustration or whatever blockage is going on in the project, in the team. Try and help your team members instead of being frustrated that they are not accomplishing a specific task. Try and help them instead. It's a much more productive way of going about things, and it helps build better and stronger bonds within the team if people can work together instead of fighting each other. Um, that'll also make your team last a heck of a lot longer. So definitely. Okay, dry mouth. Cup of coffee. Sorry about all my ranting. I hope some of it was useful. Um, okay. Completely. Well, I guess half this stream today went on to become a lot of talk about development and team building and problem solving and lots of interesting stuff in there. That sounds like an excellent idea. Well, um, if it helps you and your team, then awesome. Thank you very much for the feedback. I appreciate it. Um, I don't often like to do these kind of lectures, but if it's something that I feel can help, then I will do them. And um, yes, Most people rarely ever go into actual team building and teamwork in terms of learning how to do it. But for the most part, my experience has taught me, I never took any kind of classes in this stuff, but my experience has taught me that instead of ending up fighting, it's better if you can step back, analyze the problem, and see if you can find common ground, maybe some kind of compromise, and then get beyond whatever this particular conflict is about and move on to achieve the goal. Because everybody in the team wants to achieve success. That is the primary reason this team was founded in the first place. So if everybody's arguing or we've got a couple of people arguing, then we need to remind everybody in the team that we got together as a team to achieve success. How do we do that? We need to compromise. We need to talk about things instead of just be dismissive or arguing about things, or somebody tries to step into an authority figure and take control of everything. No, it's not a matter of taking control. It's a matter of learning to accept orders from everybody and then talking about things instead. That will help your team so much more than any other kind of structure that you might think is a good idea for the team. Sit back, accept the fact that you are there to take orders. It doesn't matter who the orders come from, because at the end of the day, you are part of building those orders yourself by applying your skills, your knowledge, and your experience. So don't sit and try and grab authority, because it will not help your team at all, ever. That's the best team building advice I can give anyone. And it's not a matter of, how should I put this, accepting defeat. Because that has nothing to do with it. You're a defeatist if you keep sticking to the same problem and keep sticking to the same arguments, because that stops the progress of your team and your project. And that is spelling defeat. So wasting time is one thing that you are never doing if you're doing any kind of development. And this is actually something that I told a British friend not that long ago. And one thing that you always need to keep in mind as a developer is that you are never wasting time, even when you feel you might be wasting time. Because at the end of whatever it is you're doing, you will still have learned something new. You might spend an entire day trying to work out how to, say, for example, grab a embedded bitmap from this particular project and getting that working. You might spend an entire day doing that. But when you close down Visual Studio after you've sat there and wasted the entire day being frustrated and blah about this particular issue, and you can't grab that one icon out of this embedded resource stuff, and you finally get it working, just like these red icons I've got sitting here. If that's what you're spending your time doing, then at the end of it, when you achieve the goal of being able to grab that icon from the resource bag and putting it on a form, you will have gone through a process. It might have taken a long time, but you have gone through a process of trying different approaches, learning which ones don't work, and learning which ones might push you in the right direction. You have honed your skills in analyzing the code. You have honed your skills in attempting things that don't work, and you have actually learned how to deal with failure. So at the end of the day, you have, regardless whatever the day might have cost you in terms of time, you will still have gained knowledge, and that is the ultimate outcome of any time spent and that can never ever be perceived as wasting time because you have learned stuff, and whatever it is you have learned, it's something that will benefit you down the line regardless. So as a developer, you are never wasting time. It may feel that way when you're sitting there frustrated, banging your head against the screen, not getting anywhere, but at some point you're going to succeed, and when you succeed, you will have gone through the process of dealing with failure, dealing with frustration, and you will have gained a lot of knowledge on how not to do things and a little bit of knowledge on how to actually do this particular task. So all of that knowledge fills your experience bag, and nobody can ever go in and say that was a waste, because any experience, regardless if it's positive or negative, is still experience. So um, you never waste time as a developer. Of course, you waste time if you're sitting on a chair looking at a white wall for 6 hours, but you know what I mean. Yeah. And when you find yourself in the trying something over and over the same way, expecting different results loop, that would be the signal to yourself that right now is the time to step away from this. You may not want to, and your drive to accomplish the task at hand may not uh, allow you to step away from it, but that is the actual time where you must step away from it. So it's a little bit OCD and irrational, yes. And every single developer out there suffers from this particular issue. Um, the key here is to learn to see that pattern when it shows up and step away. Um, I don't know, shut down the computer, go for a walk, give your girlfriend a hug, go shout at your mom, do something else. Um, Something that doesn't involve this particular issue so you can get your mind away from that particular problem and then come back to it later. That will help you step out of that repetitive loop that you're stuck in and move past it. I suffer from the same thing, and whenever I see that pattern in myself, I do exactly that. I step away. I may not step away from the computer, but I shut down my development tools, all my windows, and I go play a game or talk to friends on Discord or go for a walk or something that is completely different from what I was doing, so I can get out of that repetitive loop. And then when I get back later the same day or the day after, I'm able to step past that particular loop problem and come up with a different solution that might work, that might give me a different result. I often go in, and if I'm stuck in a loop like this with a piece of code, trying different approaches with this particular piece of code that I've written to achieve a goal. Not so long ago, I was actually facing pretty much such an issue. I was working on a bit of encryption systems, and for some reason, the wrong byte in the data that I was working with wasn't being updated as I expected it to be. And I kid you not, I spent 2 weeks being stuck in this weird repetitive loop, only being able to move which particular byte in the data set was changed, but never ever being able to hit the exact one that had to be changed. And eventually I just deleted all of the code, saved the project, I didn't commit any of it, shut down the entire thing, went and played a game with a friend, and the day after I started writing the code again from scratch. And I kid you not, the same day I found the solution. So that was 2 weeks of frustrating learning process, being stuck in the same loop over and over again. I did get different results, but the code base was wrong. So sometimes deleting the code the piece of code that's causing this particular loop issue problem, and starting from scratch can help. Of course, it doesn't help if it's, say, removing core aspects of game development or core aspects of, say, a backend for a website. But if it's a small thing like this, then sometimes it actually does help deleting the code that's causing this particular issue and then starting from scratch a day after. But definitely disconnect yourself from whatever is causing you to be stuck in this loop and try again the day after or a week later or whatever. That's exactly it. Um, the key here is to learn to see when you are entering into such a trying something over and over the same way, expecting different results loop. When you go into the Einstein loop, the key is to learn to see that in yourself. And that comes with doing the same stupid thing over and over again. And yes, I have done this God knows how many times before, so I know, I know. Um, and over time, you'll learn to see it quicker. Um, it just takes time. But you can definitely learn this particular thing and learn how to get past it by teaching yourself, oh, I'm in this Einstein loop right now. Okay, shut down, go away. Hi, bye. See you in a week. And then when you come back, you have a completely different mindset because your mind has been occupied by other things for a while. And then when you come back, you need to analyze whatever it was you were doing, but you get it from a different perspective. And that's the important thing. Get your mindset someplace different, so you can attack the problem from a different angle and then find the solution in a couple of minutes. And it usually works. And if you are working in a team or are part of a team and you can see that somebody else in the team is stuck in the Einstein loop, then the best thing that you can do for your team, for yourself as a member of that team, is to go in, grab that person, and, well, in effect, grab a baseball bat. Hey, dude, wake up, smack. You need to get a different mindset. Occupy that person with something different for a while and see if that helps the person break out of the loop and fix the problem afterwards. And regardless whatever anybody might ever say, it is never wasting time doing that because it does help the creative process move on. So wasting time as part of a development team, well, you're wasting time if you're twiddling your thumbs or staring at holes in a wall for a day or two. Yeah, that might be wasting time, but anything that breaks you out of some kind of stuck loop that you're in is never a waste of time. Anything that teaches you some kind of progression, both in terms of negatives in form of failures with getting some particular piece of code working, but also the positives, the successes, all of that is part of what builds your experience, and that can never be considered wasting time because you're building on your experience bag, and that is the one that's going to drive you through the entire project. So never consider your time wasted if you're working on some piece of code that might not work. It's a learning process, and anything that teaches you something new that you didn't know before can never be considered wasted, because knowledge these days is the most important and valuable currency that exists. You cannot get anything more valuable than that. Okay, huge lecture today. um, I hope some of it was useful and that it can help you move on, help you become a better team member, help you to help your team members become better team members. These are some of the things that I've been facing in the past. Some of them I've learned from other people. Some of them I've picked up myself. But at the end of the day, whenever I work as part of a team, I always go into that team with the idea and the mindset that I'm there to take orders. I may be the instigator of the project, but I'm still there to take orders. So you are so very welcome, James. Well, we didn't get much done in terms of development today. I guess we got the schedule manager built and a couple of other things added. We did a custom button, not much, but the rest of it kind of turned into oh yeah, well, there's always on Friday, so we can definitely pick up the coding process there. I don't think I'm going to do much more coding today because unfortunately I'm nearing my dinner time too. So at some point I'm going to have to stop today and get some dinner done. Um, Different time zones and all that stuff. But yeah, please definitely keep things coming in chat. We're all here to learn, including myself. So any questions, any suggestions, please feel free to use the chat at any time. I will try to the best of my abilities to answer any questions that might show up. If I don't know stuff, I'll let you know, and I'll see if I can figure out how. Um, and we'll take it from there. I'm definitely also open for um, any kind of off-topic things that we might discuss. It doesn't all have to revolve about scheduled dialogues and whatnot. Last time I checked, the only thing that I still need to become affiliate with Twitch is a number of followers, and that's it. I think I have achieved all the other parts of it, but oh, welcome back. And now I can actually see your name or part of it. I'm just not sure how to pronounce it. Um, yeah, I'm not even gonna try. Sorry. I hope you can forgive me. But welcome back. Um, um, Ine, that we can definitely do. Um, every single one of these segments of the streaming I've been doing for the past few weeks, whenever I go on a break, I usually cut the recording, and then when I return after a break just before, I re-enable recording so I get the vital parts of the stream in segments, and I'm uploading them on my YouTube channel. So everything that I have streamed so far is available on YouTube. I'm currently working on setting up a sort of a media hub for these projects, the stream channel itself, and all of the YouTube stuff. And I'll put in some suggestion boxes, stuff that people can submit, projects we can do on stream. If they have any kind of suggestions, we can do those. But it's still a work in progress, and I'm not quite there yet, but it's coming. And of course, I will be updating my nice panels underneath the stream thingy with links to that media hub. All of the source code for whatever projects we end up doing here on the stream. I'll make sure that they are posted on GitHub. And the Media Hub will, of course, link to all of it in a centralized spot. That's the idea, at least. So, That's somewhere over the horizon. Um, well, good luck, James. I hope you end up getting a better engine out of it. Um, and well, that's actually a pretty good question. Well, we can probably have a look. Let's see the first one. For now, I'm using my. Um, let's see the 30th of March. I did the first one this year. These are all the streams that I've done so far. All of them are on YouTube, but I have been doing a little bit of for friends streaming on and off when somebody has asked me how to do a particular task in code. I've streamed, here's an example of how you can do it, and then explained how the code should be built. So a little bit on and off for the past, I don't know, year or so. But it wasn't until March, end of March this year, that I decided to step into this for real. So I'm fairly new. But I've been teaching people how to program for, I don't know, 20 years, something like that. Um, so it's something that I've done a lot in the past. Been part of a lot of development teams on a ton of different projects. Pretty much anything you can think of, I've done. The only thing that I haven't really done is the other aspect of, how should I put this, game development as such. Meaning, I'm not a particularly good. I'm not particularly good at doing graphics. Um, I've got no clue how to model in 3D, except maybe make a cube or a sphere. I could do that from code. Um, but stuff like that. And for a while, I even dabbled a little bit in um, messing about with a bit of music, but I'm not particularly good at that either. So I've just come to the realization, well, I'm passionate about code. I'm passionate about how to build things by means of code. What the project is actually about, for the most part, doesn't matter to me as long as I find some aspect of the project interesting. Um, um, Possibly something that could teach me something I didn't know, or teach me a better, more efficient way of doing something, or a better way of setting up the code so it explains to people exactly what's going on in the code. Um, that's usually enough for me to start some kind of project. In this case, for the Minecraft server launcher, that was actually a need of my own, because I am hosting a vanilla Minecraft server for some friends, and I'm also hosting a modded Minecraft server for myself and some close friends, running my custom designed mod pack. And I keep forgetting to restart the modded server every day, as it kind of needs to, otherwise it just starts lagging. So I decided that I wanted to build some kind of management application that could take care of doing the restarts and remembering to do the backups and all that stuff in case something goes wrong. And I figured, why not put this on the stream? Because it has so many aspects of code development in it, that there should be something interesting in here, at least for some people. So far, we've done a class that handles executing Java in a shell, and fetching the output from Java, so we can do some console parsing and figure out when the server is up. Um, we've done TCP remote console access, so we can communicate to the server what we want it to do. We've built up a configuration system that lets us configure separate profiles so we can have it run multiple different server instances. Um, we've built up a player detection system that lets this application detect when players log onto the server and when they disconnect from the server, so we can keep live lists of active players within our program should we need to. Um, we've even built, let's see, I think it's this one. Um, yeah, we even built a nice UI interface for manipulating the server properties file that the server needs to be able to configure the game in the game environment to our specifications. And we've done a lot of cross data type handling. So there are a lot of different aspects in this particular project that expose at least some of the, how should I put this, design hurdles that you may be focusing when creating something that does more than just a single thing. So, so far, I've learned quite a few things building this. The entire remote console stuff was an interesting nut to crack, so to speak, for me, because I didn't know the protocol for how to actually communicate with the Minecraft server. And it actually turns out that this is actually a Valve defined protocol. Valve has Steam. They also have the source stuff where Counter-Strike and stuff is running on these days, I think. So by constructing this source remote console class, that single class could potentially be used to communicate with Valve games that support this kind of console and any other kind of game that supports this kind of remote console access. So that's definitely stuff that's interesting to do. At the moment, I actually need to move this schedule dialog thing. It belongs here. There we go. So yeah, I've definitely learned a lot of stuff with this. Well, I have done some Java programming in the past. It's not exactly a language that I feel much passion about. Um, I know that whenever I let my opinion about Java be known, it always sparks up kind of a semi-religious fight um, because of some lack of knowledge. Um, but my general opinion is that Java is a language that should have died back in the 90s where it belongs. Um, Java has unfortunately spread across the globe like some kind of plague. Um, and the major issue with Java itself is that it is extremely resource intensive. It requires unspeakable amounts of memory. It requires unspeakable amounts of CPU power, and mostly because the Java virtual machine is not a compiled environment as such, meaning when you, in quotation marks, compile Java, you build what's called bytecode. And bytecode is something that has to be interpreted by the Java virtual machine, which in effect makes Java a scripting language, not a proper programming language. Any proper programming language is always compiled to CPU code, not some kind of VM code. So therein lies the major difference, but that's also the main reason why Java is so laggy and resource intensive. I can over the years, my total list of different languages that I've been through is on the positive side of 100. So I've used a lot of different languages. So if I had to, I could easily sit down and do something in Java too. Well, thanks for stopping by. Have a great day, Ina. And thank you very much for the follow. I'll be streaming again on Friday. And hopefully I'll get some more code done on Friday as well, since today turned into lecture day. But that's all part of the experience, I guess. Okay, so with that, I think I will. Um, yeah, I definitely need to wrap this up for today. Um, any further questions, any suggestions, any kind of feedback, I'm definitely open to it. And to everyone that joined in today, a huge thank you for stopping by. Thanks for keeping the chat so alive today. That was awesome. Thank you for all the great feedback. And I will stay in the chat after closing down the stream, but for now I think I will wrap it up. Thanks for joining in and have a great day.